This is The First Century, a podcast devoted to stories from that influential period of history, including Rome, Judea, Christianity, and more. I'm your host, Dr. Brian Schmisek. Get ready to go back in time and enter a world before computers, the stagecoach, the printing press, or even stirrups had been invented for horses. We're about to enter the first century. Episode 43, The Martyrdom of James by Herod Agrippa. As we heard in episode 41, communication and relations between the churches in Jerusalem and Antioch were tight. The church in Antioch was growing due in part to its openness to Gentiles. Now a prophet by the name of Agabus, which means grasshopper, went from Jerusalem to Antioch and met with the community there. Barnabas and Paul had been in Antioch for about a year since Barnabas had brought Paul there from Tarsus. Now, Agabus claimed, or rather prophesied, as he said the word came from God, that there was going to be a famine. As a result, both Barnabas and Saul began to take up a collection of funds for those in Judea, as the Antioch church was much wealthier than those in Judea. This, too, was a way of being Christian, helping those in need. But at the same time, this was also one of the first indications of the eventually fraught relationship that the church has with money. Naturally, those in Judea were happy to receive the funds, and in some ways it made the Jerusalem Christians more receptive to the Gentile mission in Antioch. In fact, if the church in Jerusalem had not accepted or approved of the outreach to the Gentiles on behalf of the Antiochian Christians, they would have, or should have, refused to accept the money. But rejecting the generosity of Antiochian Christians was the furthest thing from their mind. The churches were united, and the funds raised from those in Antioch to relieve the church in Jerusalem for an impending famine was done in good faith, with no impure motives. Paul took notice of how the relationship worked, and especially how a generous gift of money made it easier to accept the Antiochian mission to the Gentiles. Though there was no famine yet, the Jerusalem church felt prepared. In Jerusalem, around the time of the Passover in 44, Agrippa was flexing his kingly power. The Christians had been a source of irritation to some of the religious leaders for some time, but Agrippa was not going to allow religious arguments to undermine his kingship. He remembered how he had talked Gaius out of placing his statue in the Jerusalem temple, and thereby prevented what would have become a cataclysmic war, which Rome would certainly have won. He also had recently prevented a similar situation from escalating in Dor, and he brought the critic Simon to the theater to ask him directly what exactly was antithetical to Mosaic law in that theater. Agrippa could deal, therefore, with this small band of Christians. He arrested several of them, including one of the leaders, James, the brother of John. Together, these brothers, James and John, had been given the nickname Boanerges in Aramaic, which meant sons of thunder, by Jesus himself. Agrippa would put a swift end to that thunder, and so he had James beheaded. The religious authorities appreciated his quick, bold action, and so Agrippa then arrested Simon Peter, and intended to kill him too. But out of respect for religious custom, he waited until the Passover. Yet, through mysterious circumstances, Peter had escaped prison and soon fled the city. Agrippa blamed the guards and had them executed. From Peter's point of view, his escape was nothing less than a miracle. He left the prison and went to the house of Mary, the mother of fellow Christian John Mark, where he secured provisions and made his departure, telling those who assembled there to report what had happened to James and the other brothers of Jesus. Peter would not be taking any chances. He had no intention of staying in Jerusalem with Agrippa on the throne and thirsty for blood. James, the brother of John, had already been beheaded, and there was no virtue in facing that outcome. Peter would go to Antioch and thank them for their generosity. James, the brother of the Lord, would remain in Jerusalem and lead the Christian community. Herod Agrippa was enjoying his reign over a kingdom the size of his grandfather's, Herod the Great. Herod Agrippa enjoyed imperial support and was proud of his young son, Herod Agrippa II, who is now about 17 years old. Herod Agrippa decided to have shows for the people in honor of Claudius in Caesarea, the administrative capital. Herod Agrippa's subjects there, including many Gentiles, were cheering him and appreciated his largesse, and the gifts that he was showering upon them. On the second day of the shows, Herod Agrippa wore a garment made entirely of silver, entering the theater in the morning, and when the rays of the sun made it appear even more brilliant and bright. The crowds, made up of Jews and Gentiles, were ecstatic. Some even proclaimed him godlike. Herod accepted their praise and basked in it before he was overcome with a terrible ache. He left the theater and retired to his palace, where he died less than a week later. Some in the crowd said that this was divine punishment on him for not rejecting the praise and accolades offered by the crowds. Others said that they had seen an owl on the day he arrived in his silver outfit, the owl being a sure omen that bad fortune was in store. The Christians considered it divine retribution for executing James. Everyone had a supposition or theory as to how and why Herod Agrippa could be dead when he had appeared to be in such fine condition earlier. They recalled how he had been rewarded for service to the Caesars, how he had done so much to build up the city of Jerusalem, including new walls, and that he even donated gold chains in the temple. Hubris, it seemed, had taken its toll. Agrippa left behind 4 children, a son, Herod Agrippa II, and 3 daughters, Berenice, born in 28, Mariamne, born in 35, and Drusilla, born in 38. Though Herod Agrippa II was the natural heir, he was only about 17 years old at the time of his father's death, and he was living in Rome. Claudius judged him too young to assume control of the kingdom. Instead, the young prince remained in Rome, where he continued his education and participated in life at the imperial court. He would not return to the east until he reached maturity. Rather than entrusting the kingdom to Herod Agrippa II, Claudius chose to place Judea once again under direct Roman administration. In doing so, he elevated the office governing the province from prefect to procurator. Before Herod Agrippa's restoration in 41 CE, Roman governors of Judea had borne the title prefect, in Latin praefectus, or in Greek eparchos, a designation associated with the early administration and pacification of a province. The best-known example is Pontius Pilate, whose title as prefect is confirmed by an archaeological inscription known as the Pilate Stone, and I'll include more information about that in the show notes. Accordingly, Claudius appointed Cuspius Fadus as the first procurator of Judea, entrusting him with the administration of the territory that Herod Agrippa had ruled. At the same time, the emperor reasserted Roman control over the high priesthood by reclaiming authority over the sacred vestments of the Jewish high priests, which Agrippa had previously been allowed to supervise. Next time, we'll hear more about the after effects of Agrippa's death and the challenges that Fadus and the new governor of Syria would have to address.